Before we get started, we just want to thank Old Republic Surety for sponsoring this episode of Let's Get Surety, as well as NASBP virtual seminars. For more information on Old Republic Surety, visit www.orsurety.com. Now on to our show.
You're listening to Let's Get Surety. Let me hear your bonding talk with Kat Shamapande.
Hey everyone, it's Kat Shamapande. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Let's Get Surety. I have with me today my co-host, Mark McCallum, CEO of NASBP. Hey Mark, thanks for being on.
Hi Kat, thanks for having me back.
I'm excited. We've got another installment today of our series, The Corner Office Conversations with Surety Leaders. And for today's conversation with a surety leader, we've got Tim Mikolajewski, president at Liberty Mutual Surety. Hey, Tim, thanks for being on.
Hey, looking forward to it. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to chat with you guys for a bit.
It's great to have you on. One way we always kick off with this series is just asking our guests if they can tell us a little bit how they got started off with their career in surety. Could you tell us how you got started in the surety industry, Tim?
Sure, I can do that. It goes back a long time, Kat. So I got to go back in my memory. But one thing that I do reflect on is the fact that there was no Google. We had dictionaries and encyclopedias, and you had people that you had to talk to that knew a little bit about whatever industry or whatever profession you were pursuing. So I'm not one of those really cool people that knew exactly that I wanted to be in surety, and I had done a bunch of research on it. I kind of stumbled into the industry, and thankfully I did stumble into it. But when I got out of school, it wasn't the best of times economically in that mid 80s period of time. So I was really just looking for an opportunity with a stable company that I could build a career with, and had a recruiter. I mean, there wasn't recruiters from companies that were out recruiting a lot on college campuses, et cetera. So had a recruiter, talked a little bit about my interest in the world of finance, and had always had a pretty strong interest there. And then had this opportunity to interview with a company by the name of Safeco at the time, and had a good interview there. And they offered me a job as a claims adjuster. And I remember having a conversation with my dad. My dad said, "You don't want that job. You're not going to enjoy it." So I went back to the recruiter and said, I like the company, but I didn't like the opportunity. So a couple of weeks later, they called me back and said, "Hey, we have this opportunity within surety." And they said, "We don't know a lot about it, but it's got a brochure with a guy with a hard hat on it." So I think they do some work in the construction sector. So kind of, as they say, the rest is history. I got together with the local surety manager in Cincinnati, Ohio with Safeco, and we had a great conversation, and I learned a little bit about what surety was all about at that point, and made my commitment to the industry at that point. Not knowing at least 100%, probably not even 50% of what I was really getting into.
I don't think you're alone in that, Tim. I think a lot of people came to surety without knowing the full picture of what a surety career can be.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds great, Tim. Sounds like you had a finance, business, educational background. Is that right? And did you see that ultimately as a great fit in terms of skill sets for what you went into?
I absolutely, Mark. And I think the one area of surety that I probably overlooked was the client and the customer engagement, as well as the engagement with our distribution partners. I kind of had this idea coming out of the finance world or out of a finance education, there'd be a lot of looking at financial statements and, using my number 2 pencil to fill in all sorts of spreadsheets and that sort of thing before you could do that electronically. So yeah, it ultimately ended up being such a fantastic balance between, using the analytical financial background that I had via education, but then engaging in many different businesses with so many different personalities on a day-to-day basis made it much more rewarding than I would have probably anticipated it was going to be.
Now, did you also get training then from Safeco once you came on board? I know like in the construction world is its own world with its own nomenclature and customs. How did you learn about that? And what did Safeco do to prepare you for that?
Yeah. So back then, Mark, we didn't have nearly the kind of training program. The industry didn't have nearly the kind of training programs that are available today. So, and at that time at Safeco, you got hired in, as I would say, as a generalist underwriter. So I had a little bit of construction, I had a little bit of commercial surety. And then, once I got through at least the basic part of the training program, I was assigned a territory, which at that time ended up being Northeast Ohio, which was the Cleveland, Akron, Canton, Toledo, up in that part of the state of Ohio. And whatever distribution partners we had up in that area, whether they were contract based or contract focused or contract or commercial focused, that's who you did business with. So it was a fantastic experience for me, kind of learning from, underwriting court bonds to underwriting construction projects. But I'll say this, too, as far as the construction side, you couldn't pull up YouTube and, watch them build a skyscraper in 2 minutes or a wastewater treatment plant in 2 minutes. You actually had to go out on the job site and say, hey, this is, when we're pouring structural concrete, this is what that entails, and you got a chance to actually see it done. And that was the way you really had to learn the construction side of it, is actually get out on job sites. And I would say we probably spent a lot more time back then out on job sites than we do today.
That makes a whole lot of sense, going out there on the job sites, getting that firsthand exposure. A lot of times we hear about folks talking about how mentoring was important to their careers. Is that something that you experienced? And if so, was that important to your career growth?
Absolutely. And I'd answer that in a couple of different ways, Mark. So the big change that I made in my career was a couple of years after I started in the industry. I moved from Cincinnati to Southern California. And that was an opportunity to really focus 100% on contract surety at that point. And so a couple of things happened there. One, I had a mentor at Safeco that really provided me with, the confidence, if you will, that you can do this job. We'll be there to help you. We'll give you all the support you need. Let us know what we need, where you don't feel your level of understanding of surety underwriting is where it should be. Right. So I really did have great support and a great mentor that ended up being a mentor of mine throughout my entire career after that. And then the other thing that I would say is we had a couple of construction contractors at that time in the Southern California market that were longtime Safeco customers, along with brokers that were involved with those clients that had been representing them for quite a long period of time. And whether it was on the distribution side or the contractor side, they were fantastic in being able to, or helping me understand the marketplace and being open to me to say, hey, if you come across a name or a situation that you want to bounce an idea, call us up, stay in touch. If you want to go see us build a certain type of project that you've never seen before, if you want us to help you understand how we look at risk and how we understand risk, don't hesitate to reach out and leverage us to do that. So I'd say those first 2 to 3 years in the Southern California market were so kind of developmental for me because of the mentorship that I had both internally and externally through the distribution broker side, as well as through the contractor side itself.
I mean, they always say how important relationships are in the surety business, not just for clients, but it sounds like for career growth. And you were able to make those early connections that it sounds like really paid off. Tell us what else that you think are kind of characteristics of, for a young surety professional, what they need to be aware of as they're kind of navigating that early part of their career?
Yeah, number one is just having a voracious appetite for learning. It's such a dynamic, our industry is such a dynamic industry, and you think about all the different things that you have to deal with, whether it's, understanding the risk in a construction project itself, whether it's understanding the challenges that a company may be going through from a succession planning standpoint and what options may be available there, understanding when a claims notice comes in, don't hit the panic button, but trying to understand, what factors are at play. So to me, Mark, and part of that, again, goes back to building that network of people that you need to really help you succeed. But it's having that keen commitment to really continue to learn constantly, because you're constantly going to be faced with challenges and situations that there's not a textbook or there's not a blueprint that tells you what you're supposed to do. You just have to lean on all the different support you have and a willingness to learn yourself so that you can really succeed in a position as an underwriter from a company side.
Right.
And I'd say the other part of that kind of goes with that, and as we all know that are a little bit older, change today happens so much more rapidly than it did, back then. I'm at, from the time that I was putting, number 2 lead pencil on the spreadsheets to the time that we started doing that, on an Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, it was probably 15 years, that and then it wasn't a universal immediate change in that adaptation to some of the technology. That was a little bit slower going on, but that's not the world today. I mean, the world today, things change on a constant basis, and you just have to have a mindset that change is an opportunity for you, and you need to continue to embrace it versus trying to challenge it and block it, because it's gonna happen, and you have to really embrace it.
Right. So I had the good fortune of getting to meet you, maybe a little while ago, when through a trade association, and we kind of talked about relationships and also change. I would love it if you would kind of maybe talk a little bit about your involvement in various trade associations and how that's played out, one, for the benefit of your career, and two, to keep track on what's on the minds of an industry and what is changing. So maybe from those two standpoints, talk about a little bit about that.
Yeah, and you did a good job of summarizing that, the reasons why you should do that. But hey, listen, if this is an industry that you're committed to, then why wouldn't you want to be in a position where you try to kind of direct that change in a positive way, and understand what are those things that are going to help the industry and make the industry better, and then what are those things that really could be a challenge for the industry going forward. So I think once you make a commitment, Mark, that this is the industry for you, and I really encourage everybody to give back to the industry. And again, it gets back a little bit to what you talked about. We talked a little bit about earlier, is that network of people that can help you in your careers that you continue to build on when you get involved in the industry, and when you really make that commitment that you want to do more for the industry than just your day-to-day job. So trust me, I went to enough, dinners, that were, construction related dinners, that were monthly dinners, but just the opportunity, number one, to get a pulse of what's going on in the marketplace, because at those kind of events, you hear a lot more of the gossip and you hear a lot more of the chatter that's going on in the industry than if you're, just kind of making your way around on a one-on-one basis with all the clients that you have. So that part of it really, gave you a really good perspective of what was really going on in a marketplace. And I think the other thing, Mark, is it really shows to potential distribution partners or potential construction clients that you're serious about this business, that you care about it. And why wouldn't you want to do business with somebody that has a level of passion for the business that equates to what your level of the passion for that business is?
Right.
Yeah.
Showing that care and the accessibility of being there, when things are, they're dealing with issues and you become top of mind, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to touch a little bit about, you alluded to some change and throughout your career, and I know there has been some significant changes. I was wondering if you would go into some of that. I know some things might surprise people. For example, design build, that was an exotic subject not that long ago, and now it's fairly routine. And subcontractor default insurance, and there are a lot of subjects. Maybe what are some of the bigger changes that you have witnessed, and how have they impacted you and your career?
Yeah, wow, we could, I know you and I could probably spend a couple of days talking about that. But so just a few things that are just top of mind that just popped to my mind as I think about that question, Mark. The size of the risks that we take on today, man, I remember when a $10 million obligation was a huge obligation, right?
Yeah.
And now you're talking about billions of dollars of risk that we're taking on in a single bond. So that part of it clearly has been a big change. I think the sophistication level of the construction sector has changed, and you probably have a really good perspective of that, given your background in the trade association before you joined NASBP. Is just the level of sophistication there has been really phenomenal to see that. I mean, hardly ever did anybody have a chief financial officer as part of the construction company. It was, an engineering oriented leadership team. And that's where their focus really was putting the effort in the engineering side. It'd be fun just to go through some stories about some of the financial statement, the quality of some of the financial statements that we used to get. And we actually made decisions on, these financial statements that were as crude as they could be, or it might have included a drive-by of a property to say that I own that building in a good location. So the sophistication has changed pretty dramatically. These companies now, the construction companies, are real businesses. They're not just construction companies, and many would succeed in anything because of the culture and the structure of who they are as a company, not just the fact that they're in the construction business. Technology has changed tremendously. We were talking about today. I mean, if you had a few hundred thousand, if you had 20 accounts of a few $100,000 in premium, I mean, that was a full-time job, and you were working your tail off to keep up with that. Now you look at what technology has allowed us to do from the standpoint of the amount of business that you can handle very, very effectively, because of the data and the insights that you get on that portfolio of business. And despite some of those old timers like myself that always thought it was all art and not any science, I think it's trending a little bit more to it's a balance now between there's a lot of science that makes a lot of sense, and there's a lot of science that we really need to embrace in our day-to-day decision making, in addition to the insights and the art that we all have developed through our careers within the surety world.
Well, and certainly you touched on change in the construction realm, and then also change in the surety realm. We started off the conversation with Safeco, but you're president of Liberty Mutual Surety. Tell us a little bit about how the climate for surety has changed over the last 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah, and I don't know the numbers exactly, but you dig back into some of the old information and used to see, a lot of that surety premium was really spread out over, say, or 25 sureties that were, there wasn't a whole lot of dollar difference between what those companies were writing, to the point now where, through acquisitions and mergers, you do have quite a few in the way of the mega sureties, and then, a really robust group of regional and smaller sureties as well. So yeah, that aspect has changed pretty significantly. But I will say, Mark, that's good change.
Yeah.
Because the capacity that's needed in the market today is far beyond, I think, what any of us would have anticipated, maybe even 10 years ago. And you can't sign up 20 different sureties to fill that capacity, right? I mean, you do have to have a few players that are willing to put that capacity out there to support the industry. And I'll diverge a little bit here, because it's something that's on my mind a lot, is because I see it in the international markets, where it is pretty much dominated by percentage bonds, and I absolutely adamant that this industry, at least in the U.S., should never embrace the concept of a percentage bond on any obligation. I mean, I think what we need to do everything we can from a capacity standpoint as an industry to protect that 100% performance bond guarantee that we have right now. And to me, that's not greed. I see how dissatisfied the owners are in a percentage bond situation, because there's never enough money to satisfy whatever the problem is. And I get a little bit concerned now and these are decisions that we're making, as well as every other surety in the industry today, is with the relet costs that we're faced with today. Unfortunately, the whole idea of just writing a check and walking away is a valid way to resolve a claim today. And I don't like it, because you're not really resolving, what an owner's problem really is when you do that. And it just, to me, it just devalues the product a little bit from really being a solution provider that allows an owner to walk away knowing that the dollars that they used to purchase a surety bond was a good value, because they ended up getting exactly what it was that they wanted at the end of the day.
Right. So Tim, along those lines, how much of, in shaping the conceptions of the surety product, how much it really relies on the industry being out there and doing better at education and framing assumptions up front? Do you think that's an important aspect of what we do?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you guys are right there in the heartbeat of our federal government. So, the changes that take place there. And every 2 years, you can get an election that completely changes, those relationships that you and others have built with key legislators over the years. And then you've got new people that come in that think they have a better a better way of doing things, or a better idea that could make it very challenging on our industry, given the wrong influences that may be at play. So being out in front and not taking anything for granted is absolutely, the right approach to take. And, I've always had a tremendous amount of admiration for the NASBP as well as the SFAA, and really being able to, to lead from an advocacy standpoint, and not assume that, a Miller Act and other legislation that's been in place for decades is not going to change, because it's a threat all the time.
Right. And as you point out, new people come in with knowledge or lack thereof, and need good constructive dialogue to get them back to a position that they understand the value and importance of surety, right?
Yeah.
So everybody needs to do their part, and kind of that educational and advocacy effort I know we have been fortunate in the last 2 or 3 years to have a joint fly-in, NASBP and Surety and Fidelity Association. And then that's an important thing. It usually begins in the first quarter of the year. So I'm sure we'll have more information about that. Is that something that Liberty Mutual supports in terms of having that kind of presence on the Hill?
It is, Mark. And the only thing that I would say there is that I'm fortunate at Liberty to have a really good government affairs team in Washington, D.C. that works for Liberty. And while there's no doubt that showing up as an industry is a really important and valuable process, I think the commitment of individual companies on top of that is also something that is critical, because again, it gets, it's a common theme here. You go back to building that network, with the Liberty government affairs teams, we expand that network of those legislators that we need to be in front of probably more broadly than we do through the SFAA or that we do through the NASBP, because they have other issues that they're dealing with those legislators with. But those legislators are fans of say a Liberty, or fans of a Travelers, or fans of, whatever company that might be. So I think it's a combination of both. I think we need to show up as an industry, and then I think there is that individual company component to expand the network to make sure that we've got, all the right voices, and we're influencing all the right people that we need to influence.
Yeah, perfect. You've kind of alluded to the fact that Surety is very dynamic, and there's been some opportunities. And you had mentioned on the international front, I was wondering if you could go into a little bit more depth how Liberty Mutual has kind of gone and seen opportunities on the international front. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so it probably started out, Mark, where we had, and this would be more, I'll give a shout out to the commercial surety sector, because that is probably a big sector that doesn't get necessarily the attention that contract surety does. But it started out, we focused, I'm going to say about 25 years ago, on really that Fortune 1000 or Global 1000 business, and writing surety bonds for those companies. And then, it was really U.S. focused, quite frankly, for the various obligations in the United States. But then many of them started coming to us to say, hey, can you help us out in Brazil? Can you help us out in Australia? Can you help us out with the opportunity we have in Italy? So, we started to build that network of saying, yeah, let's do what we have to do to try to be able to support those U.S. based customers when they need surety somewhere else. And the other part of it too that was at play that we started to think about, these companies had, hundreds of billions of dollars of letters of credit guaranteeing some of the same things that we would write a surety bond for in the United States. They were using letters of credit in other markets around the world to guarantee that same type of obligation. So it's a little bit harder work, because in a lot of countries there's not real clear surety laws, or real it's not really accepted as a form of guarantee. The banks are really formidable. And quite frankly, if you mention a surety bond, they wouldn't even know what surety is. They don't even think about it from the standpoint of a surety product. It's a guarantee product. And then, through that process, Mark, we found out, Italy has a very good surety law. It's called the Merloni law, which is very much like the Miller Act. So there was an established market for surety in Italy. So we set up a base in Italy. We hired local talent in Italy, and it's so critical to hire the right kind of talent. And once you do that, if you get the right kind of talent hired, it's easy at that point to build upon. As you know, Canada's always had a really strong surety market, even though there's one more percentage bonds I think are a little bit of a negative to that market. Moving in the right direction, but more work needs to be done. Mexico had a really established surety market. In many ways, the regulation in Mexico and the surety world is much, much more tough, much, much more difficult or tougher than it is in the United States. Brazil was another market that was emerging. There's so many taxing authorities in Brazil that, there was these major companies were always had issues with tax appeals and challenging whether they really owed taxes or not. So tax appeal bonds were big bonds that started to emerge in the Brazilian marketplace. So, it started that way. It started seeing these pockets where we knew that there was a continuous need for surety support for our global customers. And then, once we established a little bit of a presence in those markets and brought the right people in, we started to leverage maybe some of the local opportunities in addition to those global opportunities. And it also gave us confidence to say, hey, there's a few markets like Mexico. We acquired a company in Mexico, and it was a fantastic acquisition, and they've done nothing but make money for us and do the right thing and run just a high quality business ever since we've owned them. And then I'd say the other part of that, Mark, was to finish the long answer is those multinational construction companies that then started coming into the United States. I mean, I'm sure from your old trade association that you were part of, it was not a welcome, not welcome to see a lot of that new competition, but over time it was ultimately going to happen, right? And I think it just made it made others in the market better because now you had additional competition that you needed to deal with.
Those are certainly exciting opportunities you outlined, and it kind of underscores what you were saying earlier about the capacity strength of the industry, right? But I wanted to touch base on something else that you mentioned, the opportunities to supplant or maybe be an alternative security to letters of credit. You mentioned that in the international market, but it seems like there might be opportunities domestically, for example, maybe renewable energy space or broadband. Do you see that happening as well?
It has to, Mark. I mean, I just think that we're smarter as an industry than we give ourselves credit for, and I think we can figure those things out. I think we have a good sense both on the distribution side as well as on the underwriting side. I think we've got a good sense of what risk is and how to mitigate risk, So it goes back a little bit to what you said earlier. It's like, remember when design build was like, oh no, I mean, you and I, we're going to write a bond for a design build project that is just so far out there from a risk standpoint. And now it's almost like you welcome the reference in a design build environment. And the other thing that I think some of the things we do outside the United States is like, we do these outside the United States. Why wouldn't we do them within the United States as well? So, there's a little bit of that. Well, we've never done that in the U.S. Well, no, but that's our whole. That's 50% of our portfolio in business outside the United States. So why wouldn't we say we don't do that? Pretty much all across wherever it is, every market you're doing business in. So yeah, Mark, I agree. We there are opportunities out there that we just have to embrace, and that energy transition space, I think, is going to be a big opportunity. And I think as a sureties, let's just not sit back and say, hey, we'll bond projects that contractors will build, but let's be a transformative leader in that energy transition space, so that we do start doing some things that maybe are a little bit more forward looking, from a risk understanding and a risk assessment standpoint, and supporting those deals that make sense.
Right.
Yeah, you've talked through some of the changes and challenges you've seen happen in the industry through your career, and the growth and expansion into international for Liberty, and just some of the changes you've seen there as well. Is there any piece of advice that you received during your career that you think is just the best piece of advice you received in looking at the changes and challenges that you faced and that are to come?
Yeah, good. And some of our younger employees that I spend time with in the training program, they ask very similar questions like that. And I wouldn't say there's one word or one piece of advice, but there's a few things that I've been grounded on for a lot of years. And this goes back, many of our younger employees have never heard of a basketball coach by the name of John Wooden, who was one of the greatest basketball coaches of all time and built a dynasty at UCLA. And he had hit a lot of different little sayings, but one of them was failing to prepare is preparing to fail. And I think that is one of the things that I've always thought about, whether I'm going into a meeting with just one person, or I'm going into a meeting with a large group, or I'm going to sit down in front of a client, or I'm going to a distribution partner. I always take the time to kind of take a look at what I'm walking into. Read the most current, up-to-date information that you might have. Google something before you go into a meeting and say, "Hey, I missed something in the news." So I think there's that mindset of having a level of preparedness when you walk into a meeting, that there's very little that could potentially surprise you when you walk into that meeting. And then the other thing that we've already talked about a little bit earlier, and that is just the whole mindset of adapting to change and adapting to the inevitable progress is going to take place, and looking at that as an opportunity versus a threat to, hey, you talk about artificial intelligence now, and then you got a bunch of underwriters running around, I'm going to lose my job because of artificial intelligence. No, you're going to lose your job because you don't embrace the fact that artificial intelligence are going to make us better as an industry. So embrace those opportunities. Don't look at them as threats. Look at them as a way to get better. And hey, typically those threats are challenge a weakness in some area in our industry, in your company, and who you are as an individual. So it's a pretty good indication that you need to focus on that and get better in whatever that area is, so that threat is manageable, and it's not a threat that basically puts you out of business.
Yeah.
Well, I love that you brought up AI, and I think a lot of people think, well, will that supplant me in my role? But really, isn't AI basically a tool to make somebody more efficient? And how would it supplant the need for relationship and connection otherwise, right? So are you seeing specific use of AI on the surety side of things?
Starting to, Mark, and especially when you look at it from, let's say, the publicly traded company sector, and you've got just a mass of information that's out there in the public domain. We can use artificial intelligence to kind of synthesize that down to the critical information that we need. You look at it from a review of a construction contract, and you saw enough of those over your years, how voluminous those can be. But at the end of the day, from a surety underwriter standpoint, maybe if it's a 400-page contract, there may be a half a dozen or a dozen pages that are really meaningful, but you need to go through all of them to figure out what those dozen pages are. So if you can highlight certain clauses like liquidated damages or whatever those clauses are, and have AI synthesize that down into a 5-page synopsis where you really need to focus your attention. To your point earlier, Mark, it makes us so much more efficient in being able to spend our time on the things that are really impactful and the things that are really meaningful, versus just spending a lot of time reviewing stuff that isn't meaningful in our decision-making process.
It sounds like it might actually make underwriting and associated tasks more enjoyable in many regards.
I would think so. To me, you're doing the things that you're really, that are really meaningful. And that's one of the things I talk about with our younger employees a lot. Is part of my goal as a leader of the organization is to either invest in tools, invest in things that allow our underwriters to do the most meaningful work that they can do. And there's, from an employee engagement standpoint, there's really not much more impactful than allowing employees to do meaningful work that really they feel good about, and they see the impact that work can do.
Right.
That's great. Yeah, you're sharing some of the insights into what it's like to be a leader of a surety company. Before we let you go, can you tell us what one of the best perks is to being the leader of a surety company?
What one of the best perks?
Yeah.
There's not many, I can tell you that. No, because there's not many yes decisions that make their way to me. they're usually decisions that have made their way because that somebody couldn't make a decision or it was a difficult decision. So
yeah.
So to me, one of the perks is just the number of people that I get an opportunity to interact with on a day-to-day basis. I mean, having a conversation with you guys here today. I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed it, number one, and I do really view this as a really cool opportunity that I wouldn't have an opportunity to do this if perhaps I was in a different role. Having the opportunity to know our employees in Belgium and Italy and Mexico and Brazil and being able to in some way influence them and being able to provide them with an opportunity in an industry that I'm so passionate about. So I get a lot of satisfaction in, I've got the big Liberty umbrella sitting over the top of me, so it's not like I'm rolling the bones with my own dollars, but we act like we do that in our part of our culture within our surety organization at Liberty. But to me, CAT is so much about just I see the success that I've had and the fantastic career that I've had in surety, and I want others to experience the same. And what one regret that I'll have whenever it is I decide to hang up is I think there's so much more out there into the future that it's just going to be tough thinking you're not going to be part of all that the dynamic stuff that's going to happen in this industry over the next 10, 20 years.
Well, if we do have anyone listening that's getting a degree in finance or in risk management, what would you say to them if, surety is the career that they're just heard about and haven't considered before?
Yeah, and to just, we talked about a lot of this stuff going on, but I think just the opportunity to have so much of an impact in, just look at it from an economic standpoint. With the construction sector, if you just look at it from that lens, is 10% of the overall U.S. economy. So it's meaningful from an economic standpoint. So, and then you look at all the other businesses that in industries that we impact by the decisions that we make. There's not many jobs that you can say you can have that big an influence on the global economy and what makes the global economy work. I mean, we contribute so much to the overall commercial activity globally by the products that we have and by the customers that we do business with and support on a day-to-day basis. So to me, there's you're not isolated. Hey, we just do healthcare stuff or we just do technology stuff. I mean, we get involved in everything from a commercial standpoint, and then that's what makes part of it so rewarding from a career standpoint.
Terrific. Well, Tim, thanks so much for being on with us. It's been great chatting with you.
Thanks for sharing your passion for surety.
You've been listening to Let's Get Surety, brought to you by the National Association of Surety Bond Producers. For more information about the NASBP and its members, visit nasbp.org.
Before we go, we just want to say thank you again to Old Republic Surety for their generous support in sponsoring this episode of Let's Get Surety. For more information on Old Republic Surety, visit www.orsurety.com.